This interview is being tape recorded. My name is Paul Malleary and this is X Job Downloaded. And today I'm going to interview Paul Dunn. Now, Paul is a former warrant officer with the Welsh Guards and he's now the head of UK facilities for the British Antarctic Survey. Welcome this afternoon. Thank you so much for taking part in this. But the opening gambit is, where did it all begin for Paul Dunn? And what was the inspiration to join the Welsh Guards?
So in 1991, as everybody's aware, the government at the time put quite a significant amount of pressure on Wales as a country. And I left school with some decent qualifications, but at the time in North Wales, there was a serious recession on, and I applied for an apprenticeship at the time. And for one apprenticeship, to give you a bit of scale, there was 600 kids going for one apprenticeship at the time, and that was with British Gas.
Wow.
So my work opportunities were very limited. However, from a family background, my grandfathers had served in World War II, both in Burma and on the D-Day landings. And I used to spend many an evening with them reminiscing over some of their experiences. And one day, my grandfather said, I said, what's up with you? I'm struggling for work. Why don't you get yourself down the careers office? And at the time I was 6'3", so I walked into the careers office and I met a recruiting warrant officer from the Welsh Guards at Bangor recruiting office, and the rest is history.
Fantastic. And what battalion did you join?
So at the time I joined, the Welsh Guards were only one battalion. I mean, we suspended our second and third battalions after the Second World War. So throughout the sort of the period after the war, the Welsh Guards had only ever been one battalion. And at the time, the battalion were stationed in a place called Ballykelly in Northern Ireland, which many ex-service people will know is what used to be a rulement battalion base. So I went out there and learned some wonderful skills, met some wonderful people, and really found my feet actually when I was a new draft. And it was like a little Wales, even though we're on the northern coast of Northern Ireland. It was a fantastic experience for me as a young person.
Where did you do your basic training?
So I was fortunate enough, or unfortunate enough, to go through the Guards Depot, which today is known as the Army Training Regiment, which is in Pirbright. But back in the day, that was called the Guards Depot. I was one of the last junior soldier intakes before they developed the idea of training junior soldiers. It's more of an apprenticeship model now, done through Harrogate, I believe, but I'm not sure. But yeah, I became a junior guardsman at the Guards Depot, and then they developed the infantry training centre concept at Catterick. But I was fortunate enough to pass out, one of the last platoons to pass out of Pirbright.
Fantastic. And did you specialise in anything particular at that time, or did you just do your general duties?
So it was general. It was called the Combat Infantryman's course. There was plenty of foot drill, which was a supplement to the training programme. So I spent a lot of time, digging the healing on the square at Alexandra Barracks, as it was then. And yeah, so we just did an extra drill supplement because at the time I didn't know the leading role that House Division play in state ceremonial events for our nation. And yeah, it was quite exciting really, because even though I was going out to Northern Ireland, there was always the public duty side on the horizon. And it wasn't until we finished the tour of Ballykelly that we then settled into a period of being on the blue line, as they say. But yeah, basically the state ceremonial. And the first troop in the colour I did was in 1996, when the Irish Guards were trooping the colour. So we formed one of the detachments to support that parade, which was very good.
What is that like? I mean, I absolutely adore. I've been several times. I've been very lucky to have been there. Been to lunches afterwards at Wellington Barracks. But as a soldier, what is that like? The preparation must be phenomenal.
Lots of preparation, but I mean, you alluded to it there, Paul. I mean, my time at the Guards Depot, you were always preparing for those events. For example, bull in the boots. when you're in training, it seems to take hours, and it did take hours. But as you progress through your skills, things like preparing your equipment for those parades became second nature. And there was a time where I could do it in 20, 30 minutes and be ready for the next day. But when I was a recruit, those skills are pretty much, hours and hours of labor intensive bullying, as they called it, getting your kit up to scratch. And yeah, initially it was hard work, because the standards the House of Division demand are very high. So there was some, major generals inspections. Before you left the Guards depot to go to your unit, there was a commandant's inspection. So that was everything from your bedding to your boots to your equipment. And I suppose that's where I learned the foundations of facilities management, really, because you start to look after equipment. And then as you move up the leadership chain, you start to look after people, and then you sort of honing in skills. You don't realize you're doing it.
Absolutely. And the if your kit malfunctions at the wrong time, if you haven't looked after it properly, that could be life changing if you're out in the field.
Absolutely. And yeah, I mean, there's an old saying, a pocket in camp is a pouch in the field. So equipment husbandry is in the forces in general needs to be second to none. Cleaning of rifles, weapon systems, vehicles, as that became more and more apparent as the various conflicts this country was involved in, sort of, different driver skills, there's all sorts. So it just really developed. For me, it was, in the hills and fields of Pirbright, on the ranges at Pirbright, on the drill square at Pirbright, and then as you get through to your unit, not only are the Guards are fantastic, as you've alluded to, state ceremonial soldiers in the red, and this country is really proud of what we do, but actually the House of Division and the Foot Guards especially have a serious operational role to play in support of our country. So yeah, we were good on the square, but also had to be really honed into what was going on operations.
I always take visitors to the memorial, 5 Guards a Foot, the Irish, Welsh, Scots, Colchester Grenadiers, and it is a fantastic memorial that overlooks Horse Guards Parade. And it's absolutely stunning. And I vividly remember sitting there watching as the Guards came in, and then you've got the cavalry and everyone else. And you look at that memorial and you just think how significant it is, because you've got the King now will be on his birthday parade. We'll be sitting there looking at that memorial, looking at all of his troops. And it's just, it makes you go cold. I'll be honest with you, it makes you so. I watch it every year, even if I'm not going, I will watch it. Same with Remembrance Parade, but it just drives something through you. And I just wish we could get more motivation through the younger people to understand exactly what the military are here for and how important they are.
Oh, absolutely, Paul. I agree with that. I mean, taking part in that parade, I've done it on a number of occasions. I've been fortunate enough to be the Regimental Sergeant Major who, in tradition, it's the only time a warrant officer will draw his sword on parade. So I had that privilege in 2015. But yeah, I mean, there is an education piece. I mean, with a lot going on in the world today, I think people can sometimes be drawn away for the sacrifices that the services make in defence of people's freedom of speech, and that can be quite frustrating as a veteran. But it's about education, and I think organisations like the RBL and some of the other charities who support veterans do a fantastic job in getting that message across. But one of the good things we do in this country is give everybody the right for freedom of speech, and I just think people can sometimes forget that doesn't come lightly. As you said, as you know yourself, Paul, when you deploy, you go to countries where them freedoms aren't there. So it's just that realization of how lucky we are, really.
I absolutely agree. And the sad thing is that sometimes freedom of speech is only one way in this country, but we won't go down that route.
No.
What was your family's reaction when you've got your bearskin? I mean, that's another iconic piece of equipment. Just when you see the Reds and the bearskins, and it's just, what was it? What was your family's reaction?
So I remember in my first Queen's birthday parade, my mum and dad came along, and they were immensely proud, as they were. when I passed out of the of the Guards depot. I mean, back in the day, the parades were similar. So the pass out parade for a guardsman at a training establishment was mirrored on the actual birthday parade at the time. So I was up to speed in it. But yeah, my family were proud as punch. I mean, when I joined, I think my mum was really nervous. She didn't really want me to leave home at 16. That's pretty much unheard of now with the way they're trying to keep kids in education till they're 18. But actually, it did me some good. If you were to ask me at the time, while I was in basic training, it took me so long to get used to the rhythm of being a recruit with the early mornings, people talking to you and communicating to you in military ways. But I was never really I wouldn't class myself as one of those outstanding standout recruits. I was almost in survival mode. It wasn't till the end where I looked around and there was like probably only 30 left, and they had to amalgamate the two groups into one because a lot of people had either passed by the wayside by thinking it wasn't for them or got injured. And then I started to enjoy it. I think there was probably 10 weeks left of the course. I was used to being in the field. I was comfortable on the square, and there was just almost this coming of age where I could sort of see myself as being a soldier, really. And the thoughts did cross my mind of just leaving it till I was a little bit older, but I stuck it out. And one of the key things is being resilient in anything you do, whether it be work or your personal life. Resilience, I think nowadays is hard to come by, and the Guards Depot definitely taught me how to be resilient. There was no sympathy with, whether you were on the sick or you were feeling a bit tired, or you had that sort of 6 or 7 minutes to eat your meal, and then you were back out running around. And I remember many a time I'd be actually throwing up because I hadn't had the chance for my lunch break to properly settle, and then you'd be on a PT session or you'd be running around. But yeah, you get used to it, and I think building resilience in life is really important, and that's definitely one thing I'll take away from my early years in service.
And of course, you would have been serving with people that were in the Falklands. I mean, there would still be people within the regiment that would have served out in the Falklands in '82.
Absolutely, Paul, and I owe a lot to that peer group, the class of '82. And I'm still friends with many of those guys. There was a cohort of people from my platoon sergeant in basic training, who's a very lovely gentleman called Byron Cordy, who was on the Sir Galahad when that fateful incident happened. To my section commanders, through to when I first went into the sergeant's mess as a very young Lance Sergeant. I'm not sure if many of your listeners know, but the Guards have a unique rank of the Lance Sergeant. This is effectively a corporal, but wears 3 white chevrons and is allowed the privileges of the sergeant's mess. There's some history in that. I think it was Queen Victoria who signed off that warrant, and so I was in the sergeant's mess as a young 21-year-old in the battalion, and the mess was steeped in that cohort of veterans, and they were fantastic mentors. I talk about resilience, with those guys, you have to be resilient and be open to their ideas in a certain way. But yeah, that peer group is very much a peer group I absolutely respect, and had a big shaping of me becoming a warrant officer myself, or a senior soldier within the Welsh Guards. They're just fantastic people, and today I'm working with those guys. Many of them retired to keep the association alive and just to make sure that people are properly looked after. So that's a huge privilege, Paul.
Well, I met a guy called Spider.
Yes, yeah.
And I've just my teacup. He gave that to me.
Yeah.
In 2011. My teacup sits on that every day.
Yeah.
The Welsh Guards Association, done in Welsh slate, I'm told.
Yeah, from Blaine, I've seen them, and Spider is a part of. I'm not sure how he's getting on with his health now, but I know he was a part of the Welsh Guards pilgrims who used to go out to Europe and just make sure that the First World War and Second World War sites were looked after. And I know he used to spend a lot of time just commemorating and looking after the Welsh Guards sort of battle sites out there. So yeah, I know Spider very well. I'm not sure he's in the best of health at the moment, but I wish him very well.
Yeah, he's one of life's characters, and as I say, I was lucky. I've got some really good friends who served there, with the Welsh Guards, and of course, you would have been deployed overseas in that time, and the Falklands was one part of the Welsh Guards' history, but you also had your own tragedies with the more modern, or sort of more up to date conflicts.
Yeah.
How does it?
Yeah. I was a warrant officer when we did an Iraq tour in 2005, but unfortunately I was posted at the last minute to the infantry training centre.
Right.
They needed a sergeant post, so I did miss the 2005 tour, but our command officer at the time, Lieutenant Colonel Bathurst, who left as the Major General of the House Division, actually a very fantastic officer, actually was one of the reasons why that conflict de-escalated with the work he did around the sort of northern Basra area, and just to try and take some of the kinetic activity out of all of it. I know the PWR had been before us, where Johnson Bahari had won his Victoria Cross, and it had got really kinetic. But one of the things he did, along with the battalion and all the other attached arms and all the other units out there, was just try and come back from a period of war fighting again, which it had been through twice actually in the early 90s, and then obviously after Telek. I can't remember what the Telek number was, but I know the Irish Guards were involved with it second time round. So yeah, then we went into Operation Herrick, and as you know, September the 11th had a huge effect on not only the military but the world in general, and terrorism had a foothold in Afghanistan. And the next thing, not just the Welsh Guards, but lots of units, the Air Force and Navy should be included in this conversation, had a different role to play, doing a fairly tricky operation in one of the most dangerous, austere environments in the world. And, my own experiences of the 2009 tour were difficult. I mean, history is there that, we lost our command officer.
Yes.
Colonel Thornlow, God bless his soul, I think he was the second British officer. You might have to check your history on this, Paul, since Colonel Jones in the Falklands to be killed on operations, and he was doing that leading from the front. And yeah, we had a tough time, not only Colonel Thornlow, but lots of my pals and other fellow Welsh Guardsmen paid the ultimate sacrifice on that tour. But on the 2009 tour, it was very kinetic, and it was almost ground holding and clearing and trying to get some security in the follow-up operations. But when I went back on the second tour during the year of the Olympics in London, that was very much a different challenge. I was Company Sergeant Major of Number 2 Company, and we were the police mentoring and advisory group. And the Afghan police the Afghan government had a massive recruiting drive. I mean, they'd recruited somewhere in the region of 120 to 150,000 police officers in a short space of time. And the Taliban and the enemy forces had realised this and gone into the police, had inserted themselves into the police force. And we had very different challenges on the 2012 tour, where, we were obviously supporting the police, fighting the enemy and trying to bring some security. And we were also dealing with the insider attack, which is well documented, where unfortunately my company, we lost 5 people through insider attacks and various things that went on. And that was through us trying to take a mentoring approach to what we were doing. And we adapted. But yeah, I was disappointed with the way it ended. Not so much with the way the parachute regiment did their bit, because I thought they were absolutely, or the whole British forces were absolutely fantastic, the way they dealt with the evacuation of Kabul. But it was, for me and my mental health, that was a time where I really struggled to get my head around the sacrifices that have been made just to be leaving. But I am aware that the Americans had a huge influence in that as well. So it is what it is. History's there, and unfortunately that was the way it ended, really.
And it is. I lost some mates out there, and it's just you do question what it was all about sometimes. I mean, my dad was in the army. I live in Essex. I'm Colchester boy, so I know how it all grinds. And but I'm going to really cheese you off now, because whilst you were out there during the Olympics, Steve Shield and Leighton Wilkes took me to St James's Palace to an Olympic event, and in walked the Princess Royal.
Oh.
And she was attracted by the blue, red, blue, the ties, and she came over talking to the boys and asked where they were from. And she looked at me and she said, "But that's not a Guards tie, is it?" And she was absolutely delightful. So I'm really sorry that I brought that up, but
that's all right. I mean, without people like Steve and Leighton doing their bit, I mean, we had to have a called the Reserve Operation Group, and to look after welfare, and life functions on, and things still need to go on. So don't worry, you don't have to apologise about that, Paul.
And who's Jiffy Myers?
Oh yeah, so Jiffy is a civil servant now who supports the veterans community. I mean, my regiment is fantastic at this. We have some really good trustees, and they make sure that Jiffy's role, looking after our own in Wales and wherever the guys are. I don't really know too much about Jiffy's caseload, but I do know his work supporting our veterans in Wales has been absolutely fantastic. And I'll be honest with you, Paul, it's saved lives what he does.
Oh, I know. I mean, I've had that conversation, and when a beacon goes out and someone's gone off, he's on it, and people get found and they're put into a safe place, which is absolutely fantastic. And as I say, I'm an imposter, because I've got all these brilliant friends who have served, with the Welsh Guards. So I've got I couldn't be any further from Wales where I live, but I've got that affiliation because I've had such a positive experience with them and Billy Mott and all the guys there. What was it like getting promoted to the boss? I mean, it's the highest rank within the Welsh Guards, non-commissioned rank, isn't it? I mean, what was that like for you?
I mean, it was a huge privilege, Paul. I mean, I was running for the job with some of my closest friends, and at the time, my very good friend Leighton Ryan, who we'd met each other as youngsters in the battalion, and we'd sort of followed the same trajectory up through the ranks. And when it come to the very end, I remember we were both RQMSs, which are usually the senior WO2s who support the Regimental Sergeant Major, and we've had such a close relationship that when the command officer asked how we'd like to be told who was getting it and who would have to get another job, and I don't mean that as a disappointing, because Leighton went on to be the Regimental Sergeant Major of the Honourable Artillery Company. We just said we'll just do it over a glass of port, shake hands and move on, and that's how it went. But I can honestly say Leighton is fantastic, and there was nothing between us. But unfortunately, when you move up through the ranks, it does go in a bit of a pyramid effect where you end up, there's only one Regimental Sergeant Major job. We didn't have two battalions, and I was just really lucky. But a lot of hard work goes through it. Yeah, it was proud as punch. I mean, I thoroughly enjoyed my time as the Regimental Sergeant Major, but it does come with different responsibilities, because the people you look after is where you need to concentrate your efforts, and the decisions you make or the advice you give your commanding officer, because you are his confidant, then that has a big impact on the morale and discipline and everything of your people. And I mean, I didn't take that lightly, and hopefully I did a good job for those people. And I made sure there was lots of fun to be had as well. Society and the army is changing, or the forces are changing with society in general. So it was about maintaining a level of fun in amongst all the serious stuff was going on in a nice, disciplined way. So, for example, making sure people were out on the rugby pitch, enjoying themselves on a Wednesday afternoon, because I think the services in general, and what I found towards the end of my career, we just forgotten how to enjoy ourselves. Everything was just a bit too serious, and the sense of humour and I say banter within reason. Obviously, that needs to be thought about, but we just weren't enjoying ourselves in various things. You know, I'll give an example. The Welsh Guards St. David's Day was always, you know, a parade, get your leaks, and with a bit of consultation with some of our senior early officers, we managed to turn that round and have like a rugby tournament on actually St. David's Day, which was more for the people to enjoy other than just standing on a parade square for 3 hours getting a leak. Well, we can still do that, but we can still enjoy what we're about. And, you know, just things like that, I think, just bringing a level of enjoyment in amongst the professionalism was something I'd felt the army in general had always almost forgotten about it. I think that was due for a lack of opportunities for young service people as well. You know, the adventure training, the fact that as soon as Afghanistan had finished, there was a huge defence budget to catch up on, and the opportunities were slowly getting smaller and smaller to travel and to enjoy that side of the armed forces. So we were keen, well, I was keen to bring some enjoyment back into it, and hopefully I did that, but with some of the changes. So
it is difficult. I noticed it in the police service where, yeah, banter, all right, there was inappropriate behaviour. I get all that, but you know what? Every joke will offend somebody. It doesn't matter what joke it is, and
absolutely.
I think sometimes we've become a society where we just want to moan about things, anything.
Yeah.
And we don't know how lucky we are. When you look at the things that are going on across the globe, we don't know how lucky we are. So we moan about minutiae, which doesn't mean anything. And everybody knows their rights. And I get that. You know, we've got to deal with people with dignity. But as a sergeant major, there's no point in saying, "Oh, would you mind picking up that mortar?" Because you've got to drive it home to people. If I was doing public order, there's no point in me saying to people, "Oh, can you just move up and put the cordon on here?" You get it done, you know, and that's
I mean, I agree with you, Paul. There's a way. I think communication is important, and in the example you're giving there's that aggressive, short, sharp style. But you know, I remember one thing which I think really helped me. I used to speak to the guys every Monday, or early in the week, to let them know what was happening. So if we had gaps in guards where, you know, potentially there was people going to get messed around, or there was things in the pipeline, a little brief to them to say, right, guys, we're like, I don't know, as a regimental sergeant major, we've got this to fill. We've also got this. We're short here. So I guarantee you I'll ring fence this so you can get home and see your families, but I need a full commitment over here for this period of time. And I just found that level of communication with the guys actually helped me out, because whenever the drill sergeants or the sergeant majors needed the people power and to put the bums on seats, we could find it easier by programming better and giving people opportunity to know what they're on. And we've all been there, being messed about on the end of it. And, you know, that old thing, hurry up and wait. And that was something I hated when I was a youngster. So I tried to get a level of planning and make the guys understood, because they're not silly, that we need to do this because of this. I need your support here, and I'll get you away here. And then we've got this. And I just found it worked a lot better. And there wasn't once in my time as regimental sergeant major where we struggled to furnish any of the requirements. And we had a lot on, you know. We had the birthday parade, we had the presentation of new colours, which was something that made me immensely proud to see the guys get that off Her Late Majesty. Was something I'll never forget, and that was in the grounds of Windsor Castle. Really private ceremony. It was between the Queen herself and the Welsh Guards, and you know, the guys. You know, there were so many. Unfortunately, not everybody could get on the parade because the Windsor quadrangle is so small. But that's an example where some people, I'd say, right, you're doing the new colours, and those guys have had a go at that will then not be able to do the birthday parade. So everybody's families could enjoy it with those individuals. It was like trying to split it a little bit. So yeah, just some good planning, communication. I think that goes hand in hand with any sort of job, and I'm sort of seeing the benefits of that now in my current role. So if you can have a good plan and communicate your plan, even if it isn't even if it is a difficult task, I think you'll get the support by the people buying into what you're trying to achieve. And I think that comes down to leadership, which is a bit of a cliche word, but leading by example is an important thing, and trusting your people as well.
Absolutely. And before we move into your current role, when you took the birthday parade for the 89th birthday of the Queen, how much preparation do you have to put into that as the regimental sergeant major? How much, or does that forward to the garrison? Who takes the lead on the prep?
So the garrison sergeant major and the brigade major are responsible for the year-on-year delivery.
Right.
But the trooping regiment, if you like, in my example, the Welsh Guards, we take on the operational requirements. So that's furnishing the people and the rehearsals to get it up to standard. So we don't really see the senior team at London District, like the garrison, for example, until we're near the Major General's rehearsals, which is only the second Saturday before the Majesty.
Yeah.
And the King is now would go on. So we'd have to turn up there and be operationally ready to go. And we treat it like any other operation. Get your numbers right, make sure your planning is there with transport and feeding for the guys, making sure the administrative side of it. And Steve Shields will know this, and Leighton, on the tailoring side. And those two guys were fantastic military tailors, just to make sure that everything's is prepared. So yeah, I suppose London District is like the brigade headquarters, and then outside of the brigade you've got the battalion, the battle groups who deliver. So it's no different to any operation. And yeah, so responsibilities for the rehearsals and everything fell to me, but with a fantastic team. I had two drill sergeants. One was on the green side. So outside of the 89th birthday parade, we still had operational commitments and tasks to help other units and guards to do in the green kit. And then the ceremonial drill sergeant would work with Bill especially closely to deliver the parade. And myself, I was involved with that parade, so I had to rely on the team because I had to get my lines right, and and the kit, because the regimental sergeant major forms part of the escort, which is probably the most important. Well, it is the most important part of the parade.
Yeah, absolutely. And another question before we move on: how many times do the young soldiers have to do the Tower of London? How many times do they get to do that as a ceremonial? And Buckingham Palace, come to that outside.
I mean, so they usually come, in my experience, they were in 8-week blocks. So everybody thinks the Tower of London, Buckingham Palace and St James's Palace and Windsor actually are all separate entities. Well, they're not. They're furnished as part of the same roster. So that decision-making process has devolved to a WO2 effectively. To he'll have his slot. It'll be, let's say, the Prince of Wales's company. He'll have to furnish Buckingham Palace, St James's Palace, and the Tower of London. Now, the Tower of London traditionally is usually furnished with some of the more senior soldiers, because it came with an element of experience needs, especially for the ceremony of the keys at night. You can't have 4 inexperienced guardsmen working with somebody like Paul Cunliffe, because it just will not end well, because Paul Cunliffe will demand a standard, and rightly so, where those people need to be squared away. So when you are planning your, you usually put the youngsters on Buckingham Palace because they're quite far away and it gives them a chance to get used to the environment. Then you put your more senior guardsmen to St James's, and especially on the Tower of London. And the perk of them guardsmen as well is that they don't have to take part in the change of the guards first. They basically get on a minibus and don't even put their red kit on until probably 10 o'clock that night. So there's some perks to it and some traditions, like you might have heard of the old soldiers. They're the guardsmen who make it all happen behind the scenes. So yeah, so it's furnished exactly the same, and usually the senior element enjoy the privileges of being on the Tower of London, because that is a unique and probably more enjoyable guard. But somebody might have a different opinion to that, which is fine. But when I was a Lance Corporal and a guardsman, and I used to enjoy the Tower of London because it was it's quite a special place, as you well know.
Yeah, it is absolutely. It's an amazing place. And after 20 years, I've been going there, helping out on the IPA night. I still love it. I was there last
Yeah,
week. They got the Christmas trees up, and I just still love the atmosphere of the town.
yeah,
But so
yeah.
you sign off. At what point do you start preparing for the job that you've now got, or the jobs that you've had since leaving the military? At what point in the military did you start that?
To be honest, Paul, I didn't do any preparation for my resettlement. So in my final year of service, I was basically on for a secondment. Now the British Army had changed the way it career managed warrant officers. So we were very much, and this is something I didn't agree with, but is actually working now. But at the time, it was something I wasn't buying into, which was the command sergeant major. So the British Army now is furnished with command sergeant majors across brigades, and the Army sergeant major is a prime example. Now, my opinion at the time was that's not something I was buying into, because I think once you get to regimental sergeant major, it should be then a rite of passage into a late entry commission. So I was very traditional like that, but to be honest, I couldn't see the wood for the trees. So I was going through that process of going on a command sergeant major's course out in Texas, actually. And myself and my family, my wife, we were planning to do that move. We were going to rent the house out because it was just a wonderful opportunity. But my mother then was diagnosed with cancer, and she unfortunately passed away. And that was one of the reasons I couldn't take up that appointment out in the States. And if I'm completely honest with you, I was absolutely shattered with all of the tours I've done and everything. After 25 years, I just thought I need to give myself some time away from being told how to think, how to act, where to be and what time. So I then made a decision to leave, and I even asked for an early release, which was unheard of at the time. But the command officer tried to dissuade me from doing that. But I just wanted to go. I wanted to go, and I was feeling rather bitter about things. And the Welsh Guards and the Army in general probably didn't need me in there as a grumpy LE officer, whatever I was going to do. So I thought I just have a go in Civvy Street and see where it took me. But my first step, I was very nervous, so I went down to the University of Brighton and I enrolled on the troops into teaching, because I'd always enjoyed instructing in the army, and I'd had some low-level qualifications in instructing and teaching. So Brighton University accepted me onto that course. But I'll be honest with you, my aptitude, if you like, to be a teacher on the maths and English front, because rightly so, to teach the young people, you've got to have, wasn't quite to standard, and I never had any time to prepare for that, which I was bitter about because I was still in an operational role. So that opportunity never developed. So I then signed up to be a reservist on the FTRS, which was looking after young people out in Thetford Forest, which was close to Cambridge. And I looked at that. So I wasn't really leaving the army. And I went across for the interviews and did all that and signed up to the FTRS system. And then there was something in my heart which just thought, you're not really making the break. Is this what you want? And then I ended up there. I just pulled the pin on that, and then I was basically looking on Indeed for jobs. That's how it ended up. But I didn't fall into facilities management, and I took a job as a site manager looking after a cluster of primary schools for Peterborough County Council, actually, which was very rewarding. And then I started to learn the ropes of communication and facilities management in that role, and I did that for about 18 months.
Wow. So you're part of your resettlement, because you get time to resettle, don't you? You didn't do an FM course or anything like that?
Nothing. No, I came out, and if I'm honest, the career transition partnership, I don't know if it's got better, but I was sat there as a W1 who'd been highly tuned in and to be a state of alertness on everything. And it was about being a chef or a bricklayer. Now, no disrespect to them trades, but I was in my early 40s, and you know, God, have you seen my DIY, Paul? There's no way I was gonna retrade as a tradesman, because I think those kind of jobs you have to start from a relatively early time, like the apprenticeship programs. And I meet tradesmen in my job today, and those guys have been through an immense amount of background training. I just didn't think anything on the career transition partnership or the resettlement suited me. I looked at it, but I just took the plunge. I knew I had my enhanced learning credits. So after I finished with Peterborough County Council, I thought to myself, oh, I'll be happy just doing this for the rest of my life. But there's always an urge with service people to try and better, to be in competition with yourself, really, to improve and get a bit extra money, you know, improve the quality of life for your family. And then I moved into a role in Cambridge where I looked after a load of sports centres and large secondary schools through the COVID time as well, which tested me operationally. It was a very good job, and I learned off fantastic people. And there's lots and lots of really good people in Civilian Street who have lots of skills. And it's about bridging that gap between being a service person and actually learning to communicate. And I'm now in a position where I see lots and lots of CVs from servicemen, and the language is sometimes not quite right. I can read it, but I'm usually on a board of six or seven people. Let's say we're looking at a CV, and if the language isn't right, I'm only one of six. But it breaks my heart to see them not quite where it needs to be on the CV. I know what they're trying to say, but my other five colleagues don't. And I think there's a communication language where them transferable skills are not brought in effectively, if that makes sense. But Paul, you'll have a lot more skills than me on that.
Well, I see that, and funny enough, a really lovely chap sent me his CV today, and it was so policy that I knew exactly what he was trying to say. So I'm going to polish that up with him later on, because it's the skills are sometimes missed in the detritus in the actual CV, because they're good CVs, and like you say, if you're reading it as the RSM, you know exactly what they're trying to say.
Yeah.
But you put that in front of you know, another person who's trying to recruit for a post, and they're thinking, well, that doesn't mean anything to me.
No.
You know, but yeah, well, I do see that on a regular basis, and it's a shame.
It is a shame.
So did you have to do FM courses then? Did you go off and get trained up, or how did that all pan out?
So my portfolio of skills started in the Welsh Guards, actually. I went away and did a very good course at DEECA, which is Defence Logistics and Facilities Manager course. It's basically a quartermastering course, and on that course, 8 weeks, I had the opportunity to take the civilian equivalent, which cost me about 200 quid. But at the time I thought, well, that's money well spent, because it will give me something on the CV other than machine gunning and marching, which I was good at. So I did that, and then I learned a little bit about contract management, health and safety, workplace management, how to interact with people, how to communicate, and actually it paid dividends. So when I got my first job, all I did was took smaller tickets like my IOSH course, workplace management course, asbestos awareness, and all the things that make a good facilities manager. But I wasn't a strategic thinker then. I was almost tactically learning the ropes.
Yes.
But when I came into my next job and I had to think about cost budgets and the business side of being in facilities management, those skills I did not have a clue at. And I was aware then that to make the next step in my civilian life, to get where I wanted to get to, I'd have to do some work experience on that. And I did. And my boss at the time, a lady called Claudine, was my director of operations, allowed me within supervision to flourish, spend a bit of money, to be a project manager, to control it myself with a good bit of oversight. But then I went off to, and then actually the government changed their veteran support package, where in my head, I had these enhanced learning credits I was going to use in 10 years, but I think they changed it. They've now changed it to 5 years. So fair play to the career transition team at Aldershot. They phoned me up 4 years later after my discharge and said, Paul, are you aware this has changed? You've only got a year, the lady said to me, to get yourself on some kind of course. And then I just Googled facilities management academic courses, and then enrolled myself on a degree level course through Leeds Beckett University, which actually, in hindsight, was probably crazy because it was on the job learning and academic writing. But we're resilient as service people. I went up to Leeds Beckett. The course director at the time, through the Department of Construction and Engineering and Facilities Management, wanted to see me, and I spent 2 weeks up in their library learning the basics of academia. And then he said to me, I'll quote, "I'll take you on as a risk," because I never had any A levels. I said, "Oh, thank you very much." Fast forward 3 years after that degree course, I got a first class honours degree, and I issued an actual academic paper on facilities management, which who'd have thought as a young Welsh Guardsman coming from North Wales that was achievable. But I've got to be thankful to the enhanced learning credits system, and I would recommend anybody using that. Don't let that die out, because the tax man will keep that. And it's in the government pot. Unless you use it, it will stay in the government's coffers. And they do make it hard, Paul. It was so hard to apply for those learning credits. It was almost like you needed a degree to apply for it. But if you can just get through that bureaucracy, it's worth it.
And now you are with the British Antarctic Survey. How did that come about? I mean, that's the title itself, head of UK facilities, British Antarctic Survey. I mean, how did that come about?
Job hunting, Paul. I mean, the British Antarctic Survey have a very good recruiting page. I was always, everybody's always looking, but the dilemma I had, I was really happy. I mentioned the mentoring support I'd had in my previous role, and I was really reluctant to move on to this role, but I found it through chance, and I applied for it, and I didn't think in my wildest dreams I'd get it, but I'm very honoured to be in that organisation. And I mean, a lot of the British Antarctic Survey's history is steep in military history. We were born out of an operation called Tabarin, which was during the Second World War to set up stations in the Antarctica region to conduct scientific research, but there was also to be that presence down in that part of the world. So the early expeditions into Antarctica were led by Lieutenant Commander James Webb, who was one of the founding members, and then it became the Falkland Islands Dependency Survey, and then it changed to the British Antarctic Survey in 1962. So I didn't even know they were in Cambridge, which was local to me. So I went across for the interview, but at that stage, I'd understood the strategic element of being a senior person, especially in my profession. And at that time, I felt I was ready. So I'd done the degree. I'd had some experience on the business side from my previous roles. And it all starts at the very start. I mean, a lot of people, especially warrant officers in my peer group, think they're going to walk into high-paying jobs. You can't start up there. You've got to. Civilian Street is all about getting a good experience profile. And if that means, like when I was at the site manager, I emptied the bins. I made sure the grass was cut. I cleaned the toilets. None of that bothered me because I was getting work experience.
But you can't afford to be a job snob, because people don't give you anything. You have to earn it. And if that's earning the respect and the confidence of the people you're working with, you have to be able to do everything. And let's go back to that machine gunner. If you don't know how to use a machine gun, how can you tell somebody else to use it? And that's exactly the same. It's the same principle through business as well.
It is. And that was my biggest gap in my skill set would be the business side. And one thing I think I've struggled with, and you might have some experience of this, Paul, and the people you deal with through the sort of Vex jobs and helping service people, is that we don't think about money when we're serving. I mean, we're public service. We do what we're told. We deliver good service. We don't necessarily get involved with business. And I had to learn how to deal with finances, and there's a whole new skill set in dealing with money. And everybody says it's the root to all evil, but actually it's like any other resource. It needs to be managed within compliance methods, you know, the tendering process, contracts. And it's how this country has a, well, it hasn't, you know, the economy is improving, but it's how people get work. And it's, and when you can see the bigger picture of business, even though I work in a public sector organisation, you know, without our like, you know, contractors, you know, whether it be catering or in the facilities world, the construction and all of the industries that needed to support what we're trying to do, unless you've got a good bit of business, unless you know what you're talking about, like you say on the gun, you can't deal with a contractor because they're trying to make a living. And you've got, and it has to be business-like, and sometimes you can't give favours, you know, because in my example, we deal with taxpayers' money, and in a business, you might be dealing with somebody's livelihood. So, I mean, I really struggled with that, but it's something I got myself up to speed on pretty quickly.
Yeah, it's hard to know value sometimes because, like you say, if I needed to pour people into a particular situation, then within a little, I could say, yeah, we'll have extra people on overtime. It's different in the military. But but that's exactly right. So have you been down to the Antarctic, or do you get the opportunity?
So I've only been working in my current organisation for 2 years, and there is going to be opportunities, but at the moment the estate down there is going through a period of change with the Antarctic Infrastructure Modernisation Programme. So they're improving things like runways, accommodation, and there's most of, like any operation, it's bums on seats to get people down there. We've got a ship and a plane, a few planes. So getting rotation in there at the moment, it's the construction, the actual people who are going to be building it, and the safety staff to look after that. So spaces are limited, but in next year, hopefully I'll get a chance. Once things are built, then facilities managing comes in for things like logistics and forward mounting stuff. So I'm not saying I haven't got a role to play there, but there will be opportunities when the time is right and things are built. So I've got colleagues in the polar state who are like building things and modernizing things, and then that will slowly develop into like people occupying and working from those environments. But Cambridge is where we've started improving our science capabilities. We've got autonomous, you know, I was involved with a project building an autonomous vehicles workshop, which is a fantastic, it's almost like a torpedo that can go off the boat, our boat, the Sir David Attenborough, into the sea, and it can do a lot of the research just by, I don't know, the scientists and engineers operate it, but it can gather a lot of data from doing that. But we've built a purpose-built workshop for it with a big swimming pool, if you like, in Cambridge, and that was a really big project for me in my first one, which is now built. So, and there's other things going on at Cambridge, like a polar aquarium, which everybody thinks, oh, it's an aquarium, it's easy to build, but it's a -25 aquarium.
Ow.
So these species that come from Antarctica to be studied here, you know, they're living things, so they need an element of care, but also there's lots of legislation I've had to get my head around with DEFRA and importing of live species into this country. And also we've got the challenges of avian flu. Unfortunately, avian flu is influences that in our operational efforts, because that is starting to show itself in South Georgia and the Bird Island and South Sandwich Island. It's not yet on the Antarctic Peninsula, but it is slowly creeping down. I know this country has had a wave of bird influenza, but the scientists aren't too sure at the moment how that's going to go, because these Antarctica birds have not had to deal with it yet. So so there's lots going on. I mean, it's a really interesting role, and I think building that skill set, and you touched on it, Paul, where, you know, the job snobs, I like that. That is a really good way of doing it. You can't be a job snob. You've got to learn, you know, you can't, just because you're a warrant officer in the Welsh Guards doesn't make you a good business person. Not a chance. You've got to learn those skills. And if that means you have to go and somebody has to show you and tell you what to do, I think that's the best way to do it. And salary expectations as well of what people want when they leave can sometimes be unrealistic, I think. I mean, and I think a lot of the guys I speak to when they're coming out and they want, the triple figure salary, actually that comes with a lot of stress. You think you're going to earn them kind of money and people don't want a piece of you for it. There's the business side. You're paying somebody that you want to squeeze every inch out of that person. So there's a stress element as well, and that was something I was cautious of, is not getting myself too stressed.
But I think what you've done is absolutely spot on, because you've got stability in your life. I've got lots of friends who have gone off and done the CP stuff, and I'm not decrying what they do.
No.
But this week they'll be working. Next week they may not be working because the principal becomes fickle. They start changing their mind. You've got that stability around you, working for a credible organisation, or an incredible organisation, and that gives you that stability. But we're all different. We're all cut out of different bits of cloth.
Absolutely.
We do need to have that stability, because I don't want to be looking over my shoulder and think, I've got to work next week, or I've got to do, so it does make a hell of a difference.
Yeah, I mean, at the lowest levels, I think job stability is something, first and foremost, people who are exiting any form of service need to think about. My advice to anybody was to be realistic in your first job. So even if, a police officer or a soldier, no matter what you are, if you're going into something completely different, whether it be a project manager or something, the project managers I work with have been project managers a bloody long time. They're good professional people who understand project processes.
Yeah.
A 16-year Bobby or a 20-year soldier coming out, them are skills you've got to go and learn. You've got to go follow the person, understand it, and then implement that and professional qualification as well. Don't think just because you whoever you were, you automatically have the rite of passage on a CV. I read some saying reconnaissance 2 IC on a major operation, and my 5 colleagues are going, what is that?
What does that mean? But I had it when we first started doing this. We got CVs in, and it was I was the firearms commander for the royal wedding, and I'm like, and
right.
My wife is reading these out to me. She goes, "Oh, this is a good CV." I said, "What rank were they?" And I know who the firearms commander was for the for William and Kate's wedding. They can't all do it, and they were in their little section. They had responsibility around it, but they weren't the overall commander, and
no,
that's quite frustrating. But
yeah, I mean, it's almost the opposite. It might not be the opposite of job snobbing, but you oversell yourself.
Yeah,
I read a lot of CVs where I've been a director. I'll give you an example. I'm director of this. I'm a director of that. I've been a director of this, and I look at the salary range and think, why the hell are you coming to want to work for us when we're offering this?
Yeah,
it just doesn't. Some of it doesn't make sense. I think where service people can get it right is to get the jargon into what is a transferable skill.
Yes.
So I'll use one example. I would say, where you're saying a firearms commander, there's a responsibility skill there where they might have been responsible for an inventory or a training element or a risk element, and absolutely. So there's 3 skills, but actually that saying you're a firearms commander of this doesn't tell me you can run an inventory, you can manage risk, and you were in charge of a training budget or a certain package. And that then you think, oh yeah, responsibility, experience, is there some transferable skills there? Not I was I don't know, the major general and I was in charge of this, and that's just it's just completely out of scope for expectations.
Well, look, Paul, it's been absolutely brilliant talking to you today. Thank you so much for your time, sir. Before I conclude this interview, is there anything you'd like to add, alter, or correct?
No, not at all. I mean, just like to thank you, Paul. And if I can help ex-service people, whoever they are, I'd be more than happy to have a telephone conversation, or if somebody wants a bit of help with a CV or a little bit of advice on getting into something a bit more stable, then I'd be more than happy to help anybody really. And I'm not sure who who feeds in through you, who needs support, but yeah, that offer's always there, and I'm always happy to have a telephone conversation with anybody. It doesn't have to be ex-services who wants a bit of advice. I mean, within the confines of the job description and the business side we spoke about,
cool.
being clean in everything we do. But yeah, more than happy to help anybody who needs a hand, Paul.
You're a very good man. Paul, it's been an absolute pleasure. I really hope that at some point we can catch up. You're only down the road, and we can.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, if you ever want to come up to Cambridge and have a look at some of the stuff the British Antarctic Survey do, we've got some interesting things going on in Cambridge, which more than happy to host you for a coffee and see what they're all about. We've got an airship swing. We've got quite a complex operation, and we do have a lot of service people work for us, but we do also rebuff a lot of service people because they haven't got the language right.
Yeah, and that's, well, hopefully we can help people and get them educated into that area. Yeah,
and my offer goes, if you think somebody is, I don't want to use the word loose cannon because that might be fair, but there's no way I would have got this job leaving as an RSM there to get to here without having, without my ideas and being changed from what I thought how good I was. And yeah, I had loads of skills, but I wasn't ready to do this job, and I would have just fell on my face without the sort of prerequisites and the experience I needed. And that process has probably taken me 7 or 8 years. So I'm probably quicker than some people. But like you say, everybody's cut of a different cloth, and some people do, life gets in the way, and some people out there do get treated and probably unfairly with certain things. And I think those service people who have been given, where people have taken a risk on them, I also hear stories where they've let their employer down as well. So it's got to work two ways.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know it's a Royal Naval ad, but you're the man that was born in North Wales and made in the Welsh Guards.
There you go. And I absolutely love the Welsh Guards, and I say, would you go back tomorrow? I wouldn't go back tomorrow because I've got 25 years of fond memories. But one thing I've got is a cohort of friends that you only got to pick up the phone to.
Yeah, I know.
I'm still a Welsh Guardsman at heart, but just somebody else is doing that now, and cool. I like to go back for regimental events, and I see the guys, and it's fantastic, and there's a new generation of people coming through.
Well, when you get bored, there's always jobs at the Tower of London for former warrant officers.
But you know what? I looked at being a yeoman warder, and when them jobs came out, I'd already bought my house up here with the missus, and moving down to London and getting my kit back on. I thought that time had passed me by, but people like Paul and that do a fantastic job down there. And when you see him, send him my very best regards.
Yeah, I will do, mate. Well, listen, thank you so much for your time, and
thank you, Paul.
Hopefully we can catch up, and I will speak to the others and send them your best.
Yeah, and like I say, just drop me a line and come up to Cambridge, have a cup of coffee, or have a pint in town, or whatever you want. If you're gigging up this way, give me a shout.
Yeah, no, I will do.
If you've got anybody who's struggling and they need a hand, or somebody to have a second look at a CV, just give me a shout.
Bless your heart. God bless you.
All right. Cheers, mate. All the best, Paul.
Thanks.
Bye, mate. Bye.